Hey guys, I'm Reagan.
And I'm Ryan, and today we're going to be reviewing our second iteration of our dive watch. We released the dive watch last year, and since it's released, it's garnered hundreds of 5-star reviews, a ton of really great press, and a lot of use in extreme outdoor environments. As with all of our watches over the years, we love taking feedback from customers and building on them and improving them. The first watch was loved by all of its owners, but we saw a lot of areas where we can improve, and we're really excited to share those improvements in this video today.
Yeah, so if you're just discovering the Vaer dive collection, definitely would recommend going and looking at the first video we did last year in 2020, kind of giving a summary of that first V1 version of the watch. That video has garnered something like 300,000 views. It's been really popular, and there's tons of comments, so a great discussion there. So we're gonna try in this video to be a little bit more brief and run through things quickly, because we've already done a really popular video on the dive collection start. So mostly Ryan and I are gonna be discussing the changes and iterations to this second version, but we'll also provide some context for those just discovering the line as well. The breakdown of this video is, I'll provide a really quick summary of what the dive watch is all about. Then Ryan is going to go into specs and features and things that have changed. I will then follow up with an aesthetic update and some of the new models that we're introducing with this V2 line. And then we're going to finish things off with an FAQ, things that we've seen a lot over the last year, questions that customers have asked or people interested in purchasing the watch. So we'll just provide a summary there. Our vision for the Vaer dive collection is really straightforward. Basically, Ryan and I wanted to make the perfect everyday diver. You know, that sounds easier said than done, but our main vision for that was something that was truly functional from an in-water perspective, something that wasn't super oversized and about like showing off. It was really, you know, does this work in the water? Is this something that, you know, a true waterman would wear every single day and would make sense in surfing, scuba, kayaking, whatever it is, but it doesn't make sense. That was number one, you know, value. And then second, obviously making something that both handles the rugged outdoor tasks really well, but is also refined and sophisticated enough and timeless that you could wear it to any occasion, that you could, you know, show up to any, you know, watch collector event and stand proud and tall that, you know, a watch really makes sense, and that aesthetically everything is aligned, and that there's, you know, a deep story and origin behind it, that it's a really quality movement, that you also where it's assembled is really key, and all of those things that make a watch worth talking about and that, you know, warrant wrist time even when you're out of the water. So those were kind of the two contrasting or competing ideals, and our ideal for a perfect dive watch is to combine those things and then still offer it obviously at an affordable and fair price. So that's the summary of, you know, what the dive watch collection is all about. And then now in the next section we'll kind of break down more specifically what sets it apart from a spec standpoint, and then of course from aesthetics.
I'm going to start by reviewing the high-level features of the watch. Each of these features were reviewed in our original video, and fundamentally a lot of them are the same. So I'm going to go over the basics relatively quickly, as well as changes and improvements on the new watches. So as with the first version, the case is 39 millimeters. The bezel is 40 millimeters, and that bezel's got a ceramic insert, which we'll cover later in the video. The lug height is 48 millimeters. So in terms of fit and finish, we've actually changed case factories and improved both the D5 and D7 across the board. So in our first lineup, the D5 and the D7 were actually the same quality case. In this new lineup, both the D5 and the D7 have improvements. So the D5 in this lineup is actually improved over even the D7 in the past. Now these changes are, you know, relatively minor. They can be viewed under a loop, but they are there. You'll just see in the fit and finish, the welds, really small things that the fit and finish overall is just improved. Now on this lineup, the D7 is actually improved over the D5 as well. So we gave the D7 an improved, even higher quality case. They're really great. Honestly, this is where you get into the range of it being hard to distinguish a Vaer watch from a multi-thousand-dollar Swiss luxury watch. So those fit and finish improvements are something we're very excited about and very proud of. So now on to water resistance, which is obviously very important with the dive watch. We've maintained the same 200 meter depth rating, 200 meter water resistance from our V1 to to our V2. Reagan and I talk about this at length in a lot of different areas. We really see no need to go beyond 200 meters for any functional use in the real world. 200 meters is going to be totally sufficient. So we're proud to say, we have a gasket sealed crown, a gasket sealed case back, and that 200 meters is going to be more than enough for any ocean or water activities that you're going to do. As with our first iteration of the watch, we continue to use double domed sapphire crystal. That double domed is, in our opinion, one of the best. There's no distortion because it's double domed versus single domed crystal. We can talk about that probably in another video as well, but really beautiful crystal. We have actually improved the AR coating on these ones. So there's internal AR. We've improved the layering. That both helps with glare, but it also gives the watches a beautiful sort of blue purple hue when viewed at certain angles. Now jumping into movements. So with the D5 and D7, there's two different movements used. With the D5, we use the Japanese Miyota 9015, which is the date version, or 9039, which is the no date version. The Japanese Miyota is an incredible movement. It's one of the best Japanese movements out there for affordable watches. It has a high 28800 beat rate. It's very, very accurate. It's thin compared to a lot of the other movements in the similar price range. It's a movement we don't think we're going to step away from anytime soon. Again, it's affordable, it's reliable, it's accurate. Now for the D7, this is where we're actually making a change. We're shifting from the ETA 2824 over to the Sellita SW200. The Sellita SW200 is essentially the same as the ETA in terms of design, performance, function, timekeeping. It's simply more readily available, and it's going to allow us to continue to produce the D7 watches over time and scale that line. Now onto assembly origin. This is unchanged from our last iteration of the watches. The D5s are still assembled in the US. We just put out an awesome video that goes on a deep dive into our US assembly, and it's actually on one of the D5 watches, so that's really fun to watch. Again, as I'm sure you're aware, we're really, really proud of our US assembly. And that D7 has that Swiss-made movement, and it's assembled in Switzerland. That gets the Swiss-made stamp. Obviously, everyone knows the Swiss are phenomenal with watches, and so also something we're very proud of. Lume is another thing that remains unchanged into this iteration of the watches. We continue to use X1 grade Swiss Superluminova, which is pretty much the highest quality lume out there. We use a very healthy helping of that lume, and on the white Indocene white hand watches, it's a C1 X1 grade lume, and on the tan, it's a old radium X1 grade lume. And old radium is actually a C3 Superluminova, which is the strongest lume with a tan tint mixed in. As with our V1 watches, we continue to use ceramic for the bezels. Ceramic's used by some of the best Swiss luxury watches in the world, so we're really happy to be offering it on such an affordable watch. Ceramic as a material, it's very scratch resistant and it's very tough, but it also has a really cool shine and looks great as well. So strap options, our offering is relatively similar to the V1 watch and every other watch in our lineup. Our D5 and D7 watches include two straps of your choice. The default strap is a Tropic rubber strap. We've actually upgraded to FKM rubber. It's something we're really proud of, and it's a really great material. It's very soft, but also very tough. So that's something we're excited to be releasing with this watch. And then you can choose the second strap to be either the included at the base price are nylon straps, or as an upgrade, bracelet or a Horween line strap. For the bracelets, we're going to be offering a standard option and a premium option in the coming months. We'll be diving more into this in a separate video.
All right, so next we're going to jump into looking at the aesthetic changes that we've made to the V2 version, as well as a summary of exactly what the dive watch collection is all about in terms of the four distinct models. So similar to the specs that Ryan just went through, the aesthetic changes for the most part have stayed consistent. There haven't been a significant number of changes, but the ones that we have made it, we think really do elevate the watch in a lot of different ways. Probably the most significant, and if you're watching this video and just seeing kind of the B-roll, the highlights of the watch from different detailed angles, the main thing you'll probably notice is the play of the watch on the case sides. This is something that we first introduced with the D4 model released earlier this year. And as soon as we saw early prototypes of that watch, we knew that this is something that we wanted to bring to the D5 and D7 models. While brushed is always our default choice, and it just has a more utilitarian tool watch aesthetic because, brushed, even after years and years of use, it doesn't really look that different. Polished obviously does start to become brushed over time as it gets worn down. Fresh out of the box, and for many people who aren't going to be wearing the same dive watch for literally a decade, I think the polished aesthetic really elevates that level of expensiveness without us having to like double the price or anything. So you're getting a watch that looks a lot pricier, but is actually the same price as before. So I think that is really, really cool. And then you really just, I think you'll just enjoy it. And what I think is also great is it's not that we're just polishing the case sides in general, but we're polishing the case sides on a watch that already has such a fascinating and beautiful shape. The lyre lugs and the way that the Vaer dive watch twists, I really don't think there are many watches out there, dive watches or otherwise, that look as good as the Vaer D5 and D7 from low angles. And I would highly encourage, after you watch this video, go and look at what, maybe a watch you're considering, another diver or another micro brand watch, looks like from the side, or looks like, from, slightly curved. Because what we have seen, what Ryan and I have done research, is a lot of micro brands, can figure out the dial arrangement and the lie flat position looks fine. But when you start to look at the 360-degree view, you realize the cases are pretty boring and pretty unsophisticated. I really do believe ours looks best, of any micro brand, and feel free to challenge that in the comments or whatever else. But definitely, this has my vote, and really, I do recommend people consider that, because ultimately, when you're looking at your watch on wrist, it's not just simply at a perfect parallel view to your eyes. You're looking at your watch from a variety of angles, and really the Vaer Diver just shines just from literally every angle you look at it. So really excited on that point. Additionally, in terms of aesthetic changes, Ryan mentioned this as well when he talked about the AR coating. As soon as we looked at this first new batch, one thing that just I love is the added play of color from the sapphire. We had that in previous versions, but I think it's just leveled up here. And so not only do you get these really deep sapphire blue colors, but you even get like complex hues of violets and even some purples, which I think, especially with that they are all black dials, it really just adds a nice play to the watch, and it really does again add a level of expensiveness. So I think that's something that people are going to love, and it adds a little bit of color to watches that otherwise are fairly monochromatic. So now let's jump into the individual models within the dive watch collection, and there are four distinct models, four distinct designs. Each one is kind of tied together with the general aesthetic design idea for the Vaer dive watch collection, and that is to harken back and to draw inspiration and homage to 20th century military dive watches, primarily watches from the 1960s and 1970s. Those are the watches that Ryan and I love the most. If you were to ask us what our favorite historical dive watches would be, they are all from that late 60s, early 70s period. It really was the heyday of dive watches. So when we have the opportunity to make our own, naturally we're going to look there for inspiration first. So at that same time though, while we pulled inspiration, some more obvious than others from a variety of iconic designs, the Rolex Mil Sub, for example, the military issue Seamaster 300, Blancpain 50 Fathoms from various iterations, even the Le Coultre Deep Sea Alarm. These are all watches that we've drawn, certain aspects in. What we've tried to do, and I think is obvious if you look at, our watches versus those, is blend things together, take elements that are iconic. Of course, the Arctic design looks very similar to the Rolex Mil Sub, but the case is completely different. It's a very much more an Omega style case from the lyre lugs, and maybe from the straight on view that's not as obvious, but I can guarantee when you put it in hand or have it on wrist, the distinctive nature of these designs really comes and shows itself. So what I think you're really getting with all of these models is something that blends the best of both worlds, but definitely is kind of rooted in that time period. So if you love watches from the 60s and 70s, I think the Vaer dive collection is perfect for you. If you hate those watches, then you might want to look elsewhere, because aesthetically and just size-wise and color-wise, that's really the foundation of this collection. Jumping into the individual models, so each one of the four models is named after a body of water. So you have the Pacific, the Atlantic, the Arctic, and the Tropic. Those are our core model names within the dive collection, and I'll explain now what each of them are all about. All right, we'll start things off with the Pacific design in honor of the fact that the Pacific Ocean is the one that Ryan and I spend the most time in nearly on a daily basis, and we actually live, like about a mile from the water too. So yeah, the Pacific is, near and dear to both of our hearts. Another reason to maybe start with the Pacific design is that it actually is one that has, received a small aesthetic update from the last version, and that is changing the hour hand from a sword style hour to a larger, more prominent gladiator style hour hand, and the hour hand now matches that of the Arctic design. I think this is a kind of a no-brainer decision. It helps add, a bit of a distinctiveness between the hour and minute, but it also just really ties in nicely with the design of the dial. The large triangle at the 12 o'clock index now really nicely matches the gladiator hand, and I really just think it just ties together with what the Pacific is all about, which is kind of a very vintage inspired, very retro inspired aesthetic. So for those that are familiar with watch history, obviously the Pacific shares a lot of aesthetic similarities with vintage Omega watches. So whether that's a positive or negative, I'll leave that to you as a purchaser. But obviously there's a lot going on here that matches with some of those vintage Seamaster designs, and I think overall it really just ties things nicely together. The twisted lugs as well as a calling card of the vintage Omegas. So it's really cool to have not only the case design that matches that, but the dial in this case with the Pacific also aligns well. So you can really anticipate probably some interesting conversations over the course of wearing this for those, especially those with a keen eye or a keen knowledge of watch history, calling you out and asking, hey, is that what I think it is? And you can obviously explain that, no, this is a Vaer, this was only $500, and it was brand new and was assembled in the United States as well. So a lot of really cool talking points, but again, you can kind of guarantee that people are going to be glancing at your wrist and wondering, is that what I think it is? And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. So, all right, so that's the Pacific. Next up, we have the Arctic, and the Arctic design has always been, since launch, our most popular of the four designs, and it's also been available in two different colorways, at least for the D7, where it was available in a kind of vintage-inspired old radium colorway, as well as a white version, a more modern and contemporary white version. An update we have for the second batch is that we are now offering the very popular Arctic white in a D5 variant, and that's the one I've been wearing on my wrist. I think it looks absolutely fantastic. This again is just that opportunity where those that want that very traditional and very popular kind of dial arrangement, a very iconic, Rolex inspired look, you would say, but wanted it rather than the more retro old radium. Now it's available in white, and I really white and black, can't go wrong there. It looks good with everything, looks perfect with every type of strap imaginable and anything you can wear. So really a no-nonsense look, and something that we're really excited to be able to offer the D5 and now in Arctic white as well as the Arctic old radium. We're not doing anything with the D7. It's still available in both a white and a tan version, so a lot of options there for the Arctic, and we fully anticipate that for that reason it will remain our best-selling dive watch. Unlike with the Pacific, which received a new hour hand, and the Arctic, which now is available in Arctic white for the D5, our other models, which is the Atlantic here and the Tropic here, they have not received any individual changes or updates. So really, we didn't want to mess with a good thing. These are both incredibly popular models. We've received incredible good press, and we've spent a lot of time working on the designs, and really there was no reason to change them. So other than all of the things that we've discussed, the specs and the overall aesthetics, the polished size and all of that, these are largely unchanged aesthetically, but I'll still give a quick overview of what they're both all about. So looking at the Atlantic, the way I described it in our first video was that it was kind of the anchor of the Vaer dive lineup. It's available just like the Arctic in both a D5 and D7 version, but unlike the Arctic, which is very much kind of an homage and really pulls in from that whole retro vintage aesthetic, the Atlantic is actually much more of a contemporary and modern design. The date window at the 6 o'clock is a really useful and valuable added functionality, which kind of maybe elevates it for those that are really truly just shopping across like certain functions. But again, it's really refined, it's really sharp, but it doesn't have, its roots in the past, and so for that reason, it's one that is a perfect option for a gift as well, I would say, because maybe the old radium colorways or the Tropic design will be a little bit too far out of left field. The Atlantic is a really safe design, but safe in all the good ways. So I think, or if maybe you are having a hard time deciding or choosing, but you know you want this watch on your wrist for 5 years, the Atlantic might be the reason to choose it because it really does everything well. So that's the Atlantic, and again, it's available in 2 models because it's incredibly popular, and it really does fight neck and neck with the Arctic for overall popularity. So you really can't go wrong, and you have a lot of other happy customers with this model. Jumping in last but certainly not least is the Tropic, looking absolutely fantastic on the bracelet, as all of our watches do. But the Tropic design is the one probably that has received the most attention and excitement from the watch collector community or within the editorial community, because this is amongst those that have seen or look at watches every single day. This design is quite distinctive and unique. And so I think it draws attention and kind of is something that, if you do want to show a bit of a showpiece, or you do want something that is different than almost every other watch in your collection, I think that the Tropic is a really great place to go. Not only is, the inclusion of a nice cream coloring on the dial really interesting and distinctive, it has something we're really proud of, which is just one of the most unique and interesting date wheels, on any diver. And the date wheel just with the Atlantic is at the 6 o'clock position, but we've worked to integrate it really seamlessly into in the actual dial arrangement, so it's very, very subtle. The one thing though, on certain days it will help it stand out, is that on every 4th day, the date on the Tropic is highlighted in red, so it is technically a roulette date wheel, but I think it's just about the only watch in the world that doesn't have a roulette date wheel on every other day, but on every 4th day, and that's just something for fun and something that we wanted to do for Vaer, and it kind of ties into some bigger design ideas that is related to the Power 4 and tetradic design, to get into kind of a deeper meaning. But anyways, that's the Tropic, and a really, really fun design and really, really popular as well, and we're excited to be able to bring this back, and it really does look better than ever. Regardless of which model you choose, you're going to be in great company. You're going to have an absolutely fantastic watch that has a really interesting aesthetic and has a really interesting history and assembly origin and spec list and all of that. The other thing that I should mention, and it's probably obvious just from waving these watches around in the video, but the other thing aesthetically that is pretty unique about Vaer watches is the interchangeable straps. The fact that you can have, a very expensive looking, dive watch, which these watches are, but very quickly change the look between, the bracelet, which is probably the most traditional look, but that I can remove this bracelet in the matter of seconds and throw on, a Tropic strap. I can throw on a leather bracelet, a Horween leather, that's just, that's not easy to do with your traditional, your Rolex Submariner or whatever else. So you have to take it to a watch shop, and you probably don't really want to remove the integrated bracelet on most watches, just because it's not really what the watches are designed for. So from an aesthetic standpoint, it's awesome with Vaer, because you get many watches in one. Whatever design you choose, you can take it to the bracelet, throw it on the NATO strap, and really, I think that's just one of the coolest ways to get a variety of aesthetics, is that you can buy 6 or 7 Vaer straps along with your diver, and that's also something to keep in mind. And one of the things that makes our watches, I think, from an aesthetic standpoint, really eye-catching is just those strap options and how you can really customize it in the way that you think looks best. So. All right, now we're jumping into, I think, what will be a really entertaining and interesting section of the video, is basically FAQs. These are things that we've seen hundreds of customers ask, either through email or through Instagram or Facebook comments or on YouTube videos like this. We just picked a handful of things that we think are relevant, and hopefully, if you guys have other questions, obviously ask them in the comments. But hopefully, this will cover the bases. All right, the first question, and this is one that we get all the time, is what is the difference between the D5 and the D7?
Yeah, that's probably the most common question we get about these watches. The D5 and the D7 have about $300 difference in price point, but they share a lot of the same dials. So on the surface, especially just looking at a web page, they look very, very similar. And so the D5, it's assembled in the United States, so that's a bonus to some people. And it uses a Miyota 9015 or 9039 movement, depending on the date window. It's a Japanese movement. It's a fantastic movement, great performance, great reliability. On the surface and for day-to-day functionality, it's going to work pretty much the same as the D7, which uses a Sellita SW200 movement. The real difference is honestly around prestige. As I said, the Miyota works great, but it's a lot more affordable. It's a Japanese-made movement. That's the Sellita SW200. It is Swiss-made. It uses some higher quality materials. Again, from a everyday use timekeeping perspective, it's not a massive difference, but if you do care about the prestige of Swiss-made, and you do want that, that Swiss-made stamp on your watch, that's when the D7 really makes sense. With this version, as Reagan covered earlier in the video, D7 also does have a slightly higher quality fit and finish. So again, if you really want that really premium, kind of really high reputation piece, go for the D7, go for the Swiss-made. If that's not as much of a big deal to you and you just want a great automatic everyday watch, then the D5 is a really, really good option for you.
Yeah, and just to break it down really simply for someone who's really maybe just buying their first automatic watch, my personal recommendation would be to buy the D5 because you're really getting 90% of the product value and you're going to be blown away by that. It's going to look like a $2,000, $3,000 watch, no doubt, for that $500. However, if you're someone who has a collection that maybe only owns Swiss-made watches, then there's value there, or that you're kind of in the mindset of buying and selling watches, which always happens, getting that Swiss-made Sellita movement, that can just help in some cases on a resale value point of view.
Yeah. To expand on that further, Reagan brings up a great point. The Sellita and the Swiss-made, there's just inherent value there. Watches have value to them, and if you're going to buy a watch and own it for a long time, a Swiss-made piece will simply be more valuable just because it is Swiss-made and has that Swiss-made Sellita movement. All right, so another question that we get pretty often is, how does the Vaer diver stack up against other brands?
Yeah, the short answer is that the Vaer diver stacks up incredibly well against competition. The first thing I'd recommend people do is just read into that detailed spec list, some of the things that Ryan had mentioned. You're not going to be able to find this on many watches at a similar price point, particularly when you're, shopping with those luxury brands. Looking at the D7 priced around $800, it stacks up incredibly well with watches in the $2,000, $3,000 price point, even beyond that. So really, and we're not just saying that to make ourselves feel good. You can do your own research and look at that Sellita movement and look at other watches that use similar, Swiss-made, blue heat-treated screws, exhibition case back, all of the other specs and features, the double AR coating on the crystal and case back. All of those things are rare. And and the other aspect too is just you can judge by photos, pictures of the finishing. It's really, really on par with what you'd expect at a high-end luxury range. And then the other piece I would say, just as added evidence, if you don't trust Ryan and myself, is just look at our customer reviews. What you'll see again and again when you look at the dive reviews are customers who are making references and comparisons with their, very expensive, whether it's the Rolexes or the Omegas, and those are watches that we don't even view as in the same category, but many of our customers, are saying that, hey, we think they stack up really well, and it's always awesome to hear that. So I think overall you're looking at incredible value when you're purchasing Vaer. You're looking at something that really will, outshine the price point, and I think ultimately that's what a lot of people are looking for when they're purchasing a watch. All right, I know this is another really important question for a lot of people out there, and that is, which of the dive watches has the strongest lume?
Yeah, there's no doubt that people love their lume, and it's a question we get quite often. I can say that all of our D5 and D7 watches have the best lume in our whole lineup. They use X1 grade lume. In terms of which of the divers has the best lume, it would be the Pacific Tan. So that's a combination of a couple factors. The old radium lume that we use is actually C3, that's tinted tan, and C3 lume is very, very powerful. In addition, the Pacific has really, really big indices. So the bigger indices you have, the more surface area you have, the stronger the lume is going to be. We're actually going to be putting out a lume video pretty soon to talk about this, but the Pacific Tan is definitely the strongest. And we will say that the Tropic of the dive watches is the least strong. It's just the nature of the arrangement of the dial. Most of the lume is actually printed on the dial, and a lot of the indice hashes are a bit thinner. That's just less surface area, and that's just how lume works. So
what's your favorite combination? Which watch would you wear if you were to choose one?
That's a very, very good question. I will say from the first version and into the second version, I've been wearing the Pacific Tan most, actually on a quick release Horween line strap. I personally really like divers on a Horween strap. I think it's an awesome look. And then when I go into the ocean, I actually generally put on a single pass strap. I feel like that's the most secure and the most comfortable, so that works out really well for me. What's your favorite combo?
I'd have to say I've always gravitated towards the Arctic. I like that design the best. I like all of the designs, obviously, and I wear them all, give them wrist time, but I really do like the Arctic. I actually think I would pick the D5 Arctic White of the new V2 collection. It's kind of a fresh look. I like the USA assembled aspect. Obviously, the D7s are amazing and the movements in them are incredible. I just like the story that comes with the American assembled aspect. It's something that, just representing the brand and wearing the watch around, it's something that's fun to talk about. Obviously, there are far fewer American assembled watches in the world than there are Swiss made, so I think it's just kind of cool to advocate for the American assembly aspect of it. And I just think overall it's just a timeless and just incredible design. I'm wearing it on the Tropic strap right now, but I would actually most often wear probably on the NATO, just being in and out of the ocean a lot. I'm not really someone who changes the straps as often, so I do like just having the NATO strap on as my go-to, both in the ocean and then just around the house every day.
As always, thank you so much for taking the time to tune into our channel. We're really excited to produce these videos. We'd love it if you'd subscribe. We're going to continue to put out new content like this. Please feel free to comment. Let us know if you have questions or suggestions for new videos. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.